Building Environmental Sustainability in Supply Chains is the title of my conversation today with Jagadish Turimella. He is Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of GEP. Hello, JT.
Hi, Robert. Good to be here.
Thank you for being with me. I really appreciate it. So tell us some strategies to help companies become more sustainable, even at the same time that they're being required to control costs right now.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. As we came out of COVID-19 pandemic, the primary focus of the supply chain officers moved away from being, resiliency during the pandemic to now costs and sustainability. With some of the economic concerns looming, with slowing down of in Europe, especially with some excess capacity and some slowdown of the demand. Costs continue to be a focus area, but sustainability surprisingly has taken a front seat now, both in Europe and US, with some of the recent regulations that has been in effect already in Europe. For example, the CBAM, as it is called, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism in Europe, and there's also German LkSG, which is the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, which is focused on social and the environmental due diligence, reporting, and contingency plans. And then combined with some of the recent regulations that are also coming in California. California just passed last month a climate disclosure bill that's going to affect nearly 10,000 companies in the coming 2 years to disclose Scope 1, Scope 2, as well as Scope 3, which is first based on the greenhouse gas emissions protocol, and then also the TCFD, the Task Force on the Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. So these regulations have really kind of accelerated some of this, their journey towards the focusing on the sustainable supply chains. Scope 3, as you know, is a key area for these because most of that Scope 3 is within your supply chain.
Yeah, let's specify the Scope 3 are emissions from supply chain partners over whom the original purchaser of the services has no direct control, become therefore the most challenging. That's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of regulations that you just cited me in just a couple of minutes, and it sounds pretty daunting. I wonder if there's a bit of a contradiction here, though. On one hand, companies need to contain costs. On the other hand, instituting measures to ensure sustainability and comply with these regulations is going to cost something up front. So how are they balancing those two evidently contradictory compulsions?
Yeah. No, I think some of these it's also coming from the investor pressure. So it's not just the regulatory bodies. So and also the consumer brands too. All the consumers are demanding some of those products to be sustainable. Like, for example, you see when you're flying to New York to London, you can see the carbon emissions on different flight options you have. And our vision is to bring the similar type of for all consumer products. If you're buying a laptop or anything else just on a product label should have the emissions. So then consumers will make the choices with their consumer dollars. So it's not so much about where is my business case against this, but it's more around the investor pressure, and the boards have acknowledged it, and they've assigned chief sustainability officers. It hasn't quite percolated down all the way to the category managers and supply chain managers at the mid-levels of the organization. It's still at the CPO and CSO and then chiefs of supply chain and sustainability officer levels. Right. But it is an important balance. Now, the CBAM that I mentioned, which is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, there's a penalty of $1 million, 800,000 euros. A small mid-sized company of 3,000 employees can get hit with if you're not compliant. Wow. So there is a liability issues that need to worry about when they think about the cost benefit of investing in sustainability.
Okay, so in order to comply, companies need information about their supplier base. What are some of the questions that you need to ask your partners and your suppliers about their sustainability efforts?
So when as you said, this scope 1 and 2 are which is within the four walls of your company, you have much more control on. But on the partners in the scope 3. Is really outside of your four walls, and that really most companies are now looking at anything that they buy, all the raw materials and inputs that come into it. they're asking for life cycle analysis, LCA. There's an alphabet soup of acronyms here in this space,
Yeah,
as you
for
can.
sure.
Yeah. And then there's also a thing called cradle to cradle certifications that they're looking for. Essentially, it forces people to think about their product design. So any raw materials that's actually going into the product, they need to think about, can this product be manufactured with the material health and also through the processing, manufacturing with the renewable sources of energy. And then it's actually downstream consumed. It's actually create a zero waste to the landfill. How much of that technical components can be recycled? How much of that bio components can be recycled? So there is a zero waste efforts in the complete circularity that many of the companies are requiring their suppliers to kind of start thinking about those, and really kind of partnering with them to kind of co-create those products so that all those inputs are actually are friendly enough where they can be recycled, and then pursue a zero waste to the landfill.
So you mentioned some good sustainability trends. I'm wondering how leaders are actually progressing in those directions, the directions of, say, renewable energy, as you point out, the circular economy, ethical sourcing, and data-driven sources that give you the necessary information you need in order to assess carbon emissions from your entire supply chain. How would you grade or rate the progress of leaders toward these ends right now?
Well, the recent, about a year ago, U.S. has passed this IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is already began with a pretty significant acceleration to energy transition. So it's already underway now. There are 100 projects in the U.S. today that are $100 million each that are invested in the renewable sources of energy and hydrogen, et cetera. And the $4 billion that IRA and Department of Energy and the IRS have set aside, it was oversubscribed by 10 times. So there is a significant demand for these type of projects, and the government incentives are actually accelerated our journey towards that renewable energy. So that's only a piece of it. I think a lot of the auto and tech companies, where a lot of their scope 3 is actually in the consumption of the product, in the usage of the product. They are thinking about not only selling the product, but also leasing the products as a service, so that they have the full ownership and they can control the end of life and how it is treated at the end of life, as opposed to just crushing them into the landfill.
Yeah. So share with us some best practices that companies can put into place to reduce their supply chain carbon footprint.
Most companies have started on their journey and made pledges to net zero on scope 1 and 2. But only a handful of companies have actually started to think about scope 3. And now with the regulation, I think they are beginning to think about it. They will not have a choice in 12 months and 18 months to actually start the reporting on those. So the scope 3, the challenges are actually in the data side. And there is a lot of, they don't control the data, and it's with the suppliers. And there are simple mechanisms, because, as GEP, we spend a lot of time spending within the supply base and looking at all of their spend data. So there's one way to simply convert that spend data, invoice data, supplier data into emissions data. So that gives you a nice baseline about what the emissions are today. And with that, you can actually start to think about what the targets are. Many companies are moving towards, disclosure with CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, and also the SBTI, the Science Based Targets Initiative. So when both the consumers and the investors are now expecting both of those performance, ESG performance with these, so what that is driving is these companies to work with third parties and partners to overcome those data challenges. And then technology is actually of a significant help in automating some of this reporting, as well as collection of the data in measurement, taking some actions to reduce it, and as well as reporting into the standard reporting formats.
Thanks very much for that, JT. I do want to take a moment to ask you specifically, however, about GEP. Where do you fit into this picture?
GEP has been around for 25 years. Actually, next year is our 25th year anniversary. And we have first 15 years or so, we spent a lot of time in procurement and supply chain. And the last 10 years, we've been investing a lot in sustainability as a third pillar of our service offerings. And so we have a platform that's actually helps companies not only look at their spend characteristics and convert them into ESG characteristics, and then report into the standard reporting formats that I've just talked about, some of the CDP or SBTI or any other standard formats that these regulations are requiring them. And these are, whether you're looking for limited assurance or reasonable assurance from third-party auditors like PwC and others, so those reports are auditable. So both in terms of providing the abatement levers on strategies and helping consulting help to kind of have companies lead them through that journey of setting targets, appropriate targets, and taking actions, as well as reporting using our technology is the two areas we're supporting them.
Thanks so much, JT, for explaining how companies can actually build environmental sustainability into their supply chains, even in a time of cost cutting, and telling us a little bit about GEP as well. Thank you very much for being with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert.
I'm speaking with Jagadish Turimella of GEP. Thanks again for watching.